The great big question around the Kansas City Chiefs this offseason obviously has been whether or not the Kansas City Chiefs can three-peat as a Super Bowl champion, something that has never been done in the Super Bowl era. But there have been a flurry of articles lately stating something like, look, history's not on their side. Look, there's a reason nobody's ever done it. Hey, even the Patriots, the most dominant football force of the common football era, could not do the three-peat thing. But guys, that is the wrong question. And I know I've been saying it on this channel too, right? But at the principal core of this question, it's like getting the answer 42 when asking what's the meaning of life. You just asked the wrong question. The wrong question is not, can the Chiefs win 3 Super Bowls? Because those first 2 Super Bowls are already won. The question, Raymond, can the Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl? Now, the compounding factors that come into this happen because what happens during the course of winning multiple Super Bowls, going to multiple conference championship games, when you start getting into a half decade of being a playoff team, your draft position becomes so deleterious to the strength of your football team that this is why no one ever does it. It's not because the Patriots suddenly didn't have Tom Brady. It's not because the Steelers suddenly didn't have Terry Bradshaw and Lynn Swann. It's not because of any of that. It's because things slowly accrue that push you further down from your third tight end. Maybe now your third tight end's not an NFL guy. Well, that third tight end is responsible for kickoff coverage. So now you don't have a good third tight end to race down the field to make tackles on kickoffs. So you're giving up field position every time you score. Maybe your fourth wide receiver is really kind of a mess up. He's not an NFL caliber player, but that's the guy you have to have return punts. And all of a sudden, you have 3 turnovers on punts inside your 20-yard line because you don't have a punt returner. This is how these things add up. So I wanted to back off and ask the question, can the Kansas City Chiefs win a Super Bowl? Well, there are a collection of articles, luckily enough, in the past few days that sort of give us fragments of an answer. Obviously, the NFL season now is 17 games long, and there are 3 or 4 playoff games on the way to earning a ring, so anything can happen in the meantime. But as we set off towards training camp, the question is simple. What components go into winning a Super Bowl? The number one question is head coach. There are a ton of players in the NFL that are absolutely, at all times, all-timer level guys. Look at the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions had Calvin Johnson, who could have been the greatest wide receiver of all time, and no one can convince me differently had he only played the years in the NFL that he could have played instead of hanging them up early. The Detroit Lions had the running back that I believe would have been the greatest running back of all time in Barry Sanders had he not hung them up early. But they never had the structure in place to keep these players because they would go 3-13, they would go 4-12, 6-11, or 6-10, never making the playoffs, never having fun playing football. Do the Kansas City Chiefs have an elite head coach? Indeed they do. From CBS Sports ranking the 32 NFL head coaches, number 1 happens to be old Andy Reid, playoffs 19 of 24 seasons. Well, 79% of the time, you get to the dance. And that percentage is up with the Kansas City Chiefs. Wins, 26 of 42. That's a 62% winning percentage. Considerably better in his time with the Kansas City Chiefs. Conference titles, 5 for 11. How many of those are in Kansas City? How many of those 5? 4. Super Bowls, 3, 4, 5. That number is strangely familiar. 3 Super Bowls. Oh, yes, that's his number of Super Bowl wins with the Kansas City Chiefs. Who else could it be, the article reads? Reid's stamina is stunning, considering he's been a playoff regular since the early days of his time as Eagles head coach. Even more impressive are the ways he's adapted, reforming his Chiefs teams to fit personal strengths. Once considered the good but not elite coach who could sniff but never win the big game, Reid is now a stone-cold lock for the Hall of Fame, teaming up with Patrick Mahomes to put Kansas City in 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls, 3 of which he's left victorious. Okay, step 1. Now, I'm going to mix things up a little bit because step 2 may seem obvious. And probably it is. Probably I'm overthinking this. Probably you know what should come next on this list, but I'm not going that way. I'm going to go with a defensive angle. The NFL is an offensive league. The NFL is indeed a passing league. So if the Kansas City Chiefs can find some way to inhibit opposing quarterbacks from passing all the livelong day, all of a sudden, football becomes an easier sport to win. Ranking the NFL's top players over 30 heading into the 2024 season. And this was an article that I picked despite the fact that I think twice in the last month, from different sources, Chris Jones was listed as the number 1 defensive tackle in the league. But Chris Jones, the number 1 player over 30. The 2016 draft was franchise-altering when the Chiefs landed Chris Jones in the second round, along with his classmate Tyreek Hill 3 rounds later. This is why I wanted to read this blurb. Tyreek Hill is no longer here. Throw in Patrick Mahomes a year later, and we see a big part of how the Chiefs built a powerhouse. Jones just turned 30 last week to gain consideration into this ranking. He's such a dominant player with size, strength, and athleticism. He's now a 3-time Super Bowl champion who had 11 sacks, 35 QB hits, and 13 tackles for loss between regular season and playoff games last year. He's the best player on the Chiefs D that ranked 2nd overall in 2023. This is another important point. The unit itself is strong. The article continues, his training camp holdout and constant double teams prevented him from reaching his career best sack total of 17.5 from 2022. Chris Jones has made 5 straight Super Bowl teams and has been, or Pro Bowl teams, and has been chosen All-Pro 5 times, including first team All-Pro the last 2 years. Chris Jones makes the defense formidable, or at least the defense is something with which to be reckoned so long as Chris Jones is performing the way he is. But I chose this instead of the other articles about how Chris Jones is the number 1 defensive tackle in the league because it talks about Chris Jones' greatness. It talks about Tyreek Hill, who's gone, and it hasn't mattered that Kansas City hasn't had a premier wide receiver for the last 2 Super Bowl victories. And it mentions this defense. Now, we're going to mention a little bit later about how the defense got worse, or where, I guess I should say, the defense got worse, because I don't think the defense did really get all that much worse. But this is the next logical step. Do you have a quarterback? Well, instead of picking one of the 35 million articles that talks about how Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, and the one that came out today about how someone ranks him as the second best quarterback in the NFL, some NFL insider, I thought I would go with the people whose job it is to make money on it, because that's a different type of taking it serious than writing an article. NFL MVP odds. Now, I'm not a gambler. I do not know a whole lot about these numbers and their meaning, but this seems fairly obvious to me, and you'll have to let me know in the comments if I am wrong. Patrick Mahomes from the Chiefs is plus 450. Josh Allen of the Bills is plus 850. 450 and 850 are nearly 2 times apart. 2 times 450 is 900. 850 is just 50 short of that, meaning, at least insofar as I, a simple Midwesterner who does not gamble and probably works on a farm or something, I don't, but 850 being nearly twice 450 means Patrick Mahomes is nearly twice as likely, by the betting odds, by people who are putting their money on it, nearly twice as likely to win the MVP of the NFL as old Josh Allen, who is the number 2. If we go down to the number 10 name, that's Dak Prescott at 1,600. Quite a ways from 450, meaning far and away the most likely player in the NFL to take home the MVP this year, at least by people who were willing to bet money on it, as degenerate as that sounds. Bet money on, hey, I have money saying this guy's the best player in the NFL. Well, it's Patrick Mahomes. One more thing. Tight end rankings from CBS. Tight end is not normally one of the more consequential sports or positions on the football field, but if you have a tight end who is so good at tight ending that he has postseason receiving records, multiple, maybe that guy is worth taking into account when you are looking at the constituents of a football team. Travis Kelce, Chiefs. Kelce is one of a small handful of tight ends. Now, they have him ranked number 2. George Kittle is number 1. I'll allow the argument, even though I cannot defend it. Kelce is one of a small handful of best tight ends in NFL history. As we saw during the playoffs, he can still take over games along with Patrick Mahomes. He did have a somewhat down regular season by his standards, though, and the Chiefs are likely to continue managing his workload, taking him off the field more often on first and second downs to save him for passing situations. He was only asked to block on 30.7% of his snaps last season, the 4th lowest mark among 81 tight ends who played 100 snaps or more. That's good for him and the Chiefs, but it also holds him back from topping the list for the 2024 season. That's right. You read it here. Travis Kelce's not the number 1 tight end in the NFL because he only had to block on 30.7% of the snaps he played last season. The other interesting thing about this, they mention here something that I think is going to happen too, but in fairness, I mentioned I thought it was going to happen last year. It did not. Not particularly. Travis Kelce did play fewer snaps than last year, but they talk here about managing his workload and keeping him off the field on first and second downs. Guys, I think Jared Wiley is going to make that a very realistic goal this year. I think Jared Wiley is going to be the type of tight end that allows Travis Kelce to be off the field and the Chiefs still move the ball. And this is something we'll get into a little bit later in this video, but guys, playing fewer reps, Travis Kelce looked pretty good in the playoffs, didn't he? This is something the Chiefs are going to have to work on. This is one of the reasons why it's so disappointing that the Chiefs can't figure out a defensive tackle rotation. Now, I'm not blaming them. It's difficult in the NFL. Go pull up any roster you want. You're not going to find anything pretty on their depth chart either. But, man, if they could keep Chris Jones off the field just a little bit, it sure might help come the playoffs. Who was it? I was listening to someone the other day, and they came all the way over to my side where I was making the argument 2 years ago that the Kansas City Chiefs are playing football like a basketball team, that the regular season doesn't matter, get us into the tournament, and then we'll go full bore. Nobody had ever said that in the mainstream media, but I heard somebody say it the other day. Now, the defense lost a couple pieces that are fairly important. Willie Gay played 624 snaps last year. Willie Gay was one of the most explosive players on the defense, one of the highest upsides on the defense, and he made progress towards that upside during his time in Kansas City, to be certain. He never really took the great big stride that you were hoping for. I believe Leo Chenal to be a better overall linebacker than was Willie Gay. He does not have the upper end that Willie Gay did. 100%. I'm willing to concede that. But I think that for linebacker stuffs, Leo Chenal's skills offer him a better linebacker ceiling. Willie Gay, a much higher football player ceiling. Leo Chenal, in my opinion, a higher linebacker ceiling. Players are going to run away from Leo Chenal once he develops the reputation that he's going to have. Willie Gay never had that opportunity. Willie Gay was an explosive guy. He was not, I don't think, a guy that was very scary on the field, at least not scary in the same ways that Leo Chenal will be. So, while it is a loss to lose Willie, I think the Kansas City Chiefs defense might get better with more Leo Chenal on the field. The Chiefs lost L'Jarius Sneed. That one hurts. But the cornerback room is deep, and if anyone is capable of replacing L'Jarius Sneed in bits by part, you're not going to have a L'Jarius Sneed on the roster. But you can have a guy that does this like L'Jarius Sneed and a guy who does that like L'Jarius Sneed, and if we scotch tape them together, they're going to be able to do some of the same things and give us some of the same results as a L'Jarius Sneed. If anybody can do that, well, it's Brett Veach by pure volume, if nothing else. Brett Veach is scouting cornerbacks today. Brett Veach was scouting cornerbacks in Pop Warner this past Saturday. Brett Veach is in Canada next week to scout the CFL for cornerbacks. Yes, 1,000% I made all of that up, but I don't doubt that it's true, and I don't think you do either. On the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line has a chance to get better. Donovan Smith filled in at left tackle admirably, why I can't talk, last season for a $1 million per year player. He does not have the ceiling at this point in his career that do Wanya Morris and Kingsley Suamataia. Jawan Taylor is either going to get better or I think they're going to sit him. They now have both Wanya Morris and Kingsley Suamataia who could start at either tackle position. So, in my opinion, the line will be upgraded from last season. The running backs, everything is back except for Jerick McKinnon. It's a big loss, but Jerick McKinnon did not have the best season of his career last year either. The running backs, in my opinion, will probably be a wash. I think Deneric Prince gets the nod at running back number 3. I think he's going to get to carry the rock a few times per game. Wide receiver. Is there anyone among us that believes wide receiver will be worse than last year? Last year, by this time, I had already denied Brett Veach 4 times that I was going to come to training camp. I said, look, if you want me by week 1, I'll be in shape, but I'm not doing an Andy Reid training camp. That was the state of the wide receivers last year. I think they're going to be better. I think they're going to be better than the wide receivers that have won the previous 2 Super Bowls. So here's the main question. This team, in my opinion, is better at offensive line, better at wide receiver, a push at running back, better at tight end. Patrick Mahomes is always going to be better than his last incarnation at quarterback. He is a game studier. Defense, cornerback's going to get a little bit worse. Safety's probably going to be better. I know Mike Edwards was good, but guys, they've got some talent. Linebacker, in my opinion, is going to be better at linebacker tasks. Defensive line, maybe better. Overall, I think that's an area where it could be another push. Now, the Chiefs struggled last year in the regular season, had the fewest wins of the Patrick Mahomes era in the regular season. Struggled on offense. There was a couple dips on the defensive side of the ball as well, where I have to beg your pardon for at times last season wondering if the defense was going to turn back into a pumpkin. But I did. There were times where things were getting shaky. You remember the playoff run that the Kansas City Chiefs went on last year. How difficult did it look in the postseason? How difficult did that postseason run look? I, for one, don't know that I broke a single sweat a single time. Every one of those games felt in the Kansas City Chiefs' grasp from beginning to end. From pillar to post, start to finish, it seemed to me the Chiefs were relatively in control. It's never felt like the Chiefs' first Super Bowl run out of hand. Those deficits at times felt daunting. Nothing felt that way last season, at least in my opinion. This is subjective, I understand. So, the question is not, can the Kansas City Chiefs win 3 consecutive Super Bowls? The question is, can the Chiefs win the Super Bowl? The Kansas City Chiefs have already won the other 2 Super Bowls. They're not giving away 3 rings in this one season. Can the Chiefs win the Super Bowl? Well, they won it last year, and it appears to me that this year the Kansas City Chiefs are even better than they were. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do on the channel, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing that I talk about on the channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.